Well, it's actually, I have a friend called Lone, and she is a science journalist, and she came to me with a story. The interesting thing about, the work that I do is I'm very preoccupied with who we are as people, why we become who we become, and, what drives human beings. And then I am, looking at the kind of science storytelling at the point when I entered, I thought, okay, this is interesting. Maybe I can challenge it with what I can do. And I'm bringing in narrative-driven storytelling tradition from my film school. And I thought, okay, this might be nice to add on to this way of telling science and, conveying it to an audience. In the work that I'm doing, I'm really trying to make the films as much to the heart as to the mind. So actually an emotional track in the story is very important to me. I would like people to feel science, of course understand it and intellectually get it on a level, but I think what if we can also feel it? And to me, films are emotions. So I think that the film media in this sense would be, it's quite a nice match for science storytelling. I always try to find different languages in the cinematic story. So for instance, in the film I did, Hunting for Hedonia, that was about the brain, how do you depict the brain from the inside? And I was talking a lot with my cinematographer about this, Ben Bernhardt. We found some trees in the forest that were, naked, but they had, all their branches were kind of, a little like the brain in a way. And so we made this subtle translation of, this foresty universe into something that would mimic the brain in the story. And it's interesting when the audience afterwards tell you, oh, when I see these trees, I feel like it's a journey into the brain. And so on a very subtle level, I try to find things that will give you another sensation, just a visual sensation of something that's complex and is difficult to understand sometimes, but I try to speak to an intuitive level in a way. So it's kind of, it's to do it in a subtle way, not to, make it too obvious, because I think that's also a little cliche, if you do that. So it's doing something subtle, but that it just helps maybe ease a little bit of the understanding of the intellectual side of the story into something emotional. I would say that for the two first film, it was about this, for Hunting for Hedonia and Genetic Me, it was very much in the realm of, why do we become who we become and what drives human beings as is. That was the fascinating driver for me in this. And in that there was also a collaboration with Lone Frank, who's a science journalist, which was really interesting. So I thought, okay, here is really a story where I can convey a very, difficult topic, a very, complex situation to an audience and bring the audience to have a seat at this table with these very wise people and actually be a part of the conversation. And I feel like that's really important for all of us now, that we have a conversation about the world that we live in, the environmental crisis. Now we have a war as well. It's very important that we kind of, engage in some way. Solutions is created as a tool, as an actual tool that can go out and work in the world. It's a work method that can inspire others to do great things. Whereas my prior films were cinematic pieces that were meant to entertain an audience and, give insights into very complex matters, then Solutions were, something that should be grabbed and just used in the world, just right concretely. So that was an interesting turn for me, but I can see it. I can see the film working this way now. I see the film media as an excellent way of educating and bringing across some very complex knowledge that, on some levels might seem impossible to grasp or to understand in a way. And I think that as for us that does science films and the directors, learning has to be joyful in so many ways. It has, and I know from when I've learned most is because I've had an experience. I've had an emotional reaction, or I've had a mental breakthrough in some ways. That's when, you really learn. And films have the ability to kind of, break barriers in all of us on different levels. So I think it's a fantastic tool to educate. I have had success in working with scientists is that the film is a collaboration. Film is a collaboration and it's a dialogue. And in order to get the best possible result, this has to be something that we find strengths and bring them together. And for me, the key is not necessarily that I put it exactly together the way that they thought it would be, but the idea if they say to me, yes, that's how it was, or yes, that's in a way how I see it, then that's the signal to me that I've kind of understood it. Not that it can't be, conflictless, or, it can hold all the difficult discussions, the difficult considerations in these films, but you have to be true to the idea of what this person is doing, not necessarily true to the reality. So I see that there's a difference. It's something you really want them to love it as you do. I have an incredible editor on the film, Per Sandholt, who put together this film in a just beautiful way. And what they said, all these great people said, it's unbelievable what you have what you have made out of these days. You found the meaning in all of the chaotic dialogue that was there at times, where I felt a responsibility as a filmmaker saying, okay, I can see these incredible ideas, and if we bring them together in a film, maybe this will inspire to a next step in a way. That was the feeling that the scientists had when they saw this film, is they said, okay, this is fantastic. You found a way through all the words and all the ideas, all the visions. And, they said, this is how it was. In that sense, it was nerve-wracking, but, in the end, they were very happy about it. Well, it was a very difficult process, and I have never sat with a raw material that was that condensed. That was just, this sentence is unique in its way. This sentence is unique in its way. It was just piling stuff on. I edited this film with this great editor, Per Sandholt, and he is incredible. We found out that we could bring, what we wanted to do was to make one long conversation. But just really to get into the material, we just found the interesting places and tried to edit them all together. And, we put them up on a timeline saying, okay, these are all the things that we would really like to be in the film. We would love to have these things in the film. And this string was 10 hours. So we had to really, condense and see, okay, how do we, all of this material, how do we bring that, to, now the film is a little under 2 hours. It's still a very long film, but there's just so much information there that's important. The Santa Fe Institute is actually built around this cross-discipline thinking, so that where they bring different people together and in that way think out of the box. So the film is, in itself, it depicts this tradition where you can actually work together across sciences, but it's actually based on the place that also, believes in this, in order to kind of honor who is around the table. We had to, explain, what is this film? How are we going to do it? And some of the scientists already know some of my work, so that helped. But it was also really important to say that, in the end, you're going to see this film. And if there's something that you feel is not depicted in the right way, we will talk about this. Let you be a part of that process. It was very important to kind of honor the generosity they gave us by opening up the doors. I see this interdisciplinary work, coming out of different places now. For instance, also the environmental movement. At universities, you're very preoccupied in your own field during your study period. We would love to inspire and say, okay, can there be a little bit of time where, you can actually have this cross-disciplinary thinking brought into the teaching? Would that be interesting in a way? Because the group in Solutions kind of, in a way, had to learn it themselves through the process of the film. They all came and, with great solutions and, thinking, oh, my field is going to solve this problem, But actually in the dialogue with the people around the table, it elevated and it lifted the conversation to something that was... that had new dimensions. That was very interesting. So as I see it, this group came as individuals, but, left as a group. It could absolutely be, but I'm also thinking, what about other forms of communication? We could integrate the cinematic process on different levels. I see absolutely that this would be a way forward. We're actually working on something like this now. It's trying to see what elements can be around the table. We actually could make, a movement, because that's probably what's needed in these times. There are two things that are critical at the moment is the environmental crisis, and now we have a war. And it's interesting that Larry Lessig at one point in the film said, if we should have a global government, what would their purpose be? And he suggests, well, maybe it should just focus on one thing, peace. And here are two people, Nick Hanauer and Eric Beinhager, who actually come up with a solution for a new economic paradigm. So it's actually, it's a system that, we can apply from what we know already today, but it's a total shift of how we view something like inequality, for instance. And I think that there is this idea that we need to maybe adjust the power in the world in order to progress. And this is the idea that they have. They talk about as a way of including people in a society or not. And it's a way of looking at wealth. So they say that, the traditional way of looking at wealth is that when we have wealth, then we can include other people.